Hello, my name is Corey, and this is my first television debut. How are you today? Wonderful. The carburetor could be the most important invention since, well, the engine itself. Today we're going to run through some basics about the carburetor, and by the time we're done today, you will know how to effectively clean a carburetor. Um, but first, we should have some history of the carburetor. Uh, Many people claim to have invented this in the late 17, early 1800s. Um, it was first patented by Carl Benz, not because he was the first one to come up with it, but because he was the first one to get to it. Um, let's see. It was invented to solve the problem of turning liquid fuel into gas fuel, because if it's not a gas, it can't be ignited properly to cause the proper combustion for the engine. It works very simply. Pretty much what happens is air comes in through here, fuel through here, inside the float bowl here, the gas comes up and uses a Venturi effect, which changes the pressure of the air where the fuel gets introduced and causes the fuel to atomize, kind of. They call it atomizing. In reality, the carburetor does a very bad job, but it gets the job done all the same. Um, Now, before we begin taking this apart and cleaning it, there's something you must do. Something you must know. Never smoke around a freshly removed carburetor. These are generally filled with gasoline, and it could be very hazardous. Second of all, everything you do with this, be very careful. Stripping screws or damaging the gaskets, it's pretty much just going to waste your time and energy. So move slow, be careful. Um, Another thing you might want to know, the throttle attaches right here. There's a small flap in here, butterfly valve. Also right here is the choke. It adjusts the amount of air that is allowed into the engine, and also causes the Venturi effect as talked about before. It's all pretty simple, and we're going to start taking it apart by first, it's mounted on the engine. These are the mounting bolts. They simply screw off of the top, and then that pulls down. Second of all, you then have to remove the air intake from the air filter, and then after you have this removed, you also need to take off the choke and the throttle. You take it off, you open up the drain plugs on the bottom. It takes a 7/16 wrench. I don't happen to have one on me. You just turn that, pull it out. Sometimes there's a lot of varnish buildup in here. You take a small screwdriver and you just shove it up through the hole, spin it around, clean it out, gas will come right out. After you get the gas out, this should be good to work on. There we go, very magnetized. Pretty much you just turn it upside down. There's these four mounting bolts, not mounting bolts, just screws holding it together. This is the bottom of the float bowl. This is the top of the carburetor. All pretty simple. So you just take it apart. You can use a power drill, but again, be very careful. If you ever use a power drill, be sure you loosen the bolts by hand first. Never just throw it on there, because you'll definitely strip it. Alright. Now that should be loosened up enough. Or I'm just lying to you. Almost have it here. Maybe if I just do it by hand, I can feel it. Make my life easy and this go a bit quicker. Alright, pull it straight up. This is now the float bowl. As you can see here, the last time I pulled this off, there's a lot of white powder in there. That's all varnish from gasoline being left in this over the winter. Alright, right here in the middle, you have a jet. That is the main jet that sprays the gasoline into the Venturi area, creating it to atomize. Let's see. That's pretty much all you need to know about this part for now. Alright. This part's the float. What happens is the gas comes in through here and bypasses the float through this hole. Pretty much. It sits like this, and when the bowl fills with gasoline, it causes this float to push upwards and seal this valve right here. Once it floats up, the metal covers the valve. When you're cleaning this out, there's one pin right here. It's pretty small. I don't even know if you can see that, honestly. Right there. Get right in on that pin, and you just push it straight out. And then you pull it straight off. Careful to hold the spring, because it will go flying. And that's never fun to lose these. Alright, pull the float off. Here's your hole where the gasoline comes in. Pretty much you just want to inspect it to make sure there's nothing in there. That hole looks pretty clean, nothing to cause any misfires. But what you can do is take some of this carburetor cleaner and spray it right down into this hole. What that's going to cause it to do is spray out through this hole, making sure that it's clean. And if it doesn't come through, you take any kind of a wire. It can be a wire or a small screwdriver like this one. Pretty much anything. You just stick it down through here, ring it around, pull it out, spray the carburetor cleaner through it one more time. That takes care of that. There's also one more jet here. This is how the gasoline gets... Actually, that's just the adjustment. Alright, and then the other jet is in this bottom piece. That's just a bolt. Pretty much, if I had the gasket taken out, what I could do is pull this piece off as well. But these gaskets are about $45. This is off of a 1953 THD welding engine, mill welding engine. It's an antique, and these gaskets are pretty hard to come by, so removing this or damaging it in any way would be very costly. So pretty much, you have your main jet down in here like I showed you before. You want to make sure that's completely cleaned out. What you can do is take a 1/4-inch wrench socket, put it over that, and turn it out gently. Or you can take this small scraper, put it down in that hole, move it around, and take the carburetor spray tube, stick it into the jet, and spray it, and it'll come out through this hole. And if it sprays out through evenly, you know it's clean. Let's see. And then just be sure you have compressed air, because after you spray all this carburetor and air intake cleaner into it, it pretty much just evaporates into the air. You just spray some compressed air in there and make sure you don't get any other debris in there from like a drying cloth or anything. And that's pretty much it for cleaning it out. Now you just got the reassembly. This is pretty much the hardest part. Most of these float bowls come with a needle that goes above this. This model's so old it actually, I guess it came out before the needle for it was invented. You just simply take the float. The float needs to be back to like it was before. Take that teeny little spring. And this is where it gets tricky. The spring has to provide pressure against the fluid. So, if the fluid is going to be pushing upwards, I need the spring pushing downwards. So pretty much, it just needs to be like this. Easier said than done. Alright, then you put the spring through it, being very careful to keep it even, because if the spring doesn't do its job, the carburetor's just going to flood. And it does always help if you put the bolt back in when it's on the assembly. If you don't, you're just wasting your time, like I just did. Alright. It's kind of tricky, but I should be able to get it here. Don't do this if you have shaky hands. It might be kind of difficult to get it back together. And I have some of the shakiest hands. But I still got that back together pretty fast. Alright. I don't know if I just didn't put that on properly. Alright, so now I'm going to take that back apart. It's not the end of the world. I just got to pop it. There we go. Not too shabby. Alright, now it closes effectively again. And all it has to do, again, is cover that valve. When the gasoline pushes it out. If it doesn't flow freely, then you need to clean it better. Alright, next step. Make sure the gasket area is completely smooth. If there's any remaining gasket and it sets improperly on top, like for instance this one little piece that I missed, it could cause a leak in the carburetor, causing an air leak, which would keep gas from being vaporized properly. To reassemble this, you just simply set it back on top. Make sure the float is in there evenly, and then you line up the holes. Be sure you set it down straight and not to wiggle it at all. When you get it back on there, you could damage the gasket. This is the choke operating the Venturi. All pretty simple. Simply flip it back upside down, reinstall your bolts. Generally, you want to take note of where bolts come from in an engine and always put them back in the same spots. In this case, they kind of just fell out by themselves, so it doesn't really matter. As long as you're not on the internal parts of an engine, it doesn't make a huge deal. But you pretty much just screw that back together. Be sure your drain plugs are both properly reinstalled. Let's see, there we go. They're supposed to tighten across from each other so you don't damage the gasket. Let's see. And we're almost done here. So you've pretty much finished cleaning out your carburetor. Not really all that much to it. Just tighten it down evenly. Never over tighten. There's no real need for it. As long as your gasket's in good condition, it'll do all the work for you. And there we go. Not too bad. So, now you know how to clean your carburetor if you ever have any starting problems. Let's see, generally carburetors still come on small engines. On new cars, they're now equipped with fuel injection systems, which work completely differently. And just don't forget to drain it first, be safe, and take it slow and easy from there. It should be pretty easy. And now you know how to clean a carburetor. Thank you for your time, and take it easy.